I've interviewed hundreds of analysts, and one of the things that many of them get wrong and actually prevent them from getting a full-time role is the ability to deliver data communication effectively to senior leaders. It's one thing I always used to check when running a case interview, and hopefully in this video, I'm going to walk you through a process to redevelop how you think about communicating to leaders such that you can be more effective in your job and actually communicate data. So this video is really designed for anyone who's going into a role where they're going to be using data and actually have to communicate that to get things done. And also those who are maybe being promoted into a new role where all of a sudden you have to be able to stand behind your data much more coherently as you're communicating with executives across the board. So we'll dive into the deck here. So we're going to talk about this concept called the 3-slide rule. And really the way I'm thinking about it is you take what you would traditionally do, which would normally be a very in-depth brief, and actually convert it into 3 main takeaways. And we're going to what those are. And at the end, I'm going to give you a prompt to actually help you do this using AI and show you what the potential output for that could be. So firstly, let's talk about the use case here. So have you ever been in a situation where you've spent days, weeks, potentially months going through a deep technical analysis? You have a really good methodology, you have some really strong data, and you have a really good recommendation, and then you actually go to present it, and 15 minutes in, the VP says, "No, so what's the big takeaway here? Not interested in all the data, just tell me what you want to do." And the reason for that is that you actually went through the wrong order of presenting the information. You started the way that we would normally structure a scientific report with the problem, then the methodology, then the execution, then the results, then the recommendation at the bottom. What we actually want to do when communicating with executives is flip it around. We actually want the recommendation up front. We want fewer slides overall, and we want to make it clear what we're recommending and why. And if we do need to get into the methodology and the data and the results and everything else, that can come later. But what I'm really going to push you to do here is think through what is the key takeaway that you want this to happen. And the reason for that is that there's 2 real brains here that we're considering. So if you're an analyst or you're working with data a lot, you have this analyst brain, and it goes through all these steps in the process. So you start with, okay, what is the raw data that I have available to me? What are the assumptions that I can control as I'm going through the analysis of this data? What is the methodology I'm going to use to analyze the data? What is the best approach? What are the findings as I've conducted the analysis? And then what is the punchline? What is the conclusion about what I found? Why? How supported is it? How confident am I in that key takeaway? And that is all great. It's really important work you have to do. You have to be able to go deep on technical analysis in order to give a strong recommendation. But the challenge comes when you're communicating that to a decision maker. They don't want to know all the steps in the process. What they want to know is, what should we do? What recommendation up front, bottom line up front. Why do you believe this? So what is the most important evidence that supports the recommendation? And then 3, what if we don't do this? What is the cost of inaction? Because you may be making a recommendation that's going to involve a lot of resources, whether financial or human, and the question may be, well, what's the risk if we don't carry out this process? And so every time that you present something bottom up, you're going to confuse the decision maker because they're going to have to hold all of that information in their head when you make your recommendation. If you start with your recommendation, they're kind of building the case the way you would structure an argument. And so the bottom line up front structure, the BLUF structure, actually comes from the time that I spent in the military, where we would have to communicate very effectively. And I was an engineer, and so my day-to-day role was actually getting deep on technical problems. But what I had to do then is make a quick communication to the aircrew to let them know what the problem was and what my recommendation to resolve was, and then go into the detail of it if they wanted. Most of the time, they just wanted to know, when can their aircraft be ready to fly? And because I could go into the depth on the technical side, they trusted me to give the recommendation and understand exactly what that meant. And so I would really encourage anyone to take the same approach with analysis here. So BLUF structure is 3 parts. 1, state the recommendation. What exactly do you recommend they do? This should be very specific and have a clear deadline. Step 2 is, what is the minimum viable evidence that you have to support that recommendation? So really kind of 2 to 3 data points is usually plenty. You may want to go into increased depth, but I would suggest you take the strongest evidence that supports your recommendation, and be prepared to go into the rest of the evidence as needed. If this is a slide deck, you would have the appendices. If this is a white paper style, you actually again have an appendix with all of that supporting data in there that you can get into if you need to. But that's not something you want to put in front of a stakeholder up front. And then step 3 is cost of inaction. What happens if we don't follow this recommendation? What is the cost to it? And really with the BLUF recommendation, I'm going to encourage you to think through 3 big things. What is the action verb? What is the specific number? And what is the deadline? So you might want to say something like, we need to hire 3 additional engineering recruiters by March 15th. Not what I hear a lot of people say, we may want to consider exploring additional recruiting capacity options over the coming quarter. Like, what does that mean to a stakeholder? How are they able to translate that into an action item that they need to take away and go and drive forward? So 3 main patterns that I see quite frequently. This happens in interviews, it happens even just listening to other analysts communicate to stakeholders or communicate to me. These are, I'd say, the 3 big things that you want to avoid. One is the hedge. So don't say, I recommend we consider possibly exploring, maybe. Use definitive words. You want to say, we need to invest, we need to hire, we need to cut. Take a position, stand behind it, give the evidence. Be prepared to change your position if you have counter evidence that supports that, or if throughout the conversation it's clear that maybe you were wrong about something, but you need to have a position up front. You need to stand behind this. Step 2 is the buried number. So we may need additional recruiting capacity. Well, how much do we need? When do we need to buy? Actually get very clear on exactly what you need and by when. And then the pre-apology, I really hate this one. It's, while this analysis has some limitations, don't state that up front. Lead with the ask. This is what I need by this date. You have a recommendation, you have an ask, get that very clear, get the evidence behind it, get the recommendation clear. Make it clear what happens if you don't follow that recommendation, and use that BLUF format that we just covered. So 3 slides, what do you need when making this recommendation? Don't go for the 10-slide, 12-minute presentation where you only have 3 minutes to discuss and a 15-minute meeting's over. Think about the 3 slides you can cover in 5 minutes, and so you have 10 minutes to actually discuss the additional context for what you're saying. Slide 1, this is what I recommend. Here's the headline. Slide 2, here's what the data shows. 1 chart and how you interpreted that. And step 3 is, here's what happens if we don't. Put it into terms that the stakeholder cares about. If it's a VP, they probably care about the P&L, the profit and loss. So what is the financial cost to the business if you don't follow this recommendation? And I'm going to show you how I think about doing that with this demo in Claude. So here's a prompt that you can use. So let's say you've run an analysis, you have an output, you have a report, and you actually want to think about how you might communicate that in a very succinct way. Using AI to actually get you part of the way there is a really good example. I'm going to cover why you shouldn't rely solely on AI in just a second. But just to show you what this could actually mean, I've actually pre-done this output here. So I just took a very basic recruiting capacity calculator from the course that we're building right now and ran it through this. You can see it actually run through all the data, and it gave me my 3-slide BLUF output. And you can see right here what that actually looks like. So, slide 1, recommendation. Approve 3.8 additional engineering recruiters before April to close a 57% capacity shortfall against Q2's 238 rec forecast. Supporting context is the data that goes into the calculation for that evidence. The evidence behind it, you have this bar chart. So, current team, unfilled gap, what that means. But right now we have capacity for 13, we actually need capacity for 20, so we need to close that gap. If we add the additional headcount, this is what it means. The cost of inaction. If we don't do this, it's going to cost us $870,000 to the business, because that's the projected cost of the vacancies here. So what is the aggregate exposure? What is the calculation? And you might get tested on this, so make sure it's right. But having this data up front, this 3-slide deck, is going to give you much more power going into that meeting when you're actually trying to drive the decisions. So going back to our 3-slide rule, once you've gone through the process of creating your deck, especially if you're using AI, this is what I want you to do next. Edit the 3-slide deck. Firstly, is that recommendation actually yours? If you came up with some analysis, you dropped it in, does the output actually make sense? I've seen people just take the output, paste it into a slide deck. I've seen people do this in interviews where they're supposed to present an original idea, and then they can't actually go into the weeds of the recommendation that they are presenting. So Claude doesn't know about your organization, doesn't know the nuances of your stakeholder, If the budget only supports 2 recruiters, not 3, change the number. Make sure that you're adapting the recommendation you're making to the peculiarities of the organization that you're working with. 2 is to chart the right chart. So we had a bar chart in that example. If the VP wants tables, if the VP wants something very different, make sure that you're customizing the output to the stakeholder that you're working with. And 3, does the cost number hold up? Run some quick analysis. Does that actually make sense? Maybe a quick note to your finance peer. Does this actually align with expectations? You don't want to present something that is completely wildly inaccurate and then lose your credibility because you relied solely on AI to make that recommendation. So think about it this way. You run your analysis as you normally would. You run it through an AI like Claude to give you your structure, your recommendation. You then go through and make sure that that makes sense. You adapt the output to the structure that you actually want to communicate to and that you can back up and support. 2 things that people always ask. 1, my leadership wants more detail. They actually want the 20-slide deck. That's fine. If you want to build out a bigger deck because you need to build confidence within the team, start with this is the bottom line up front, this is the supporting evidence, this is the cost. Then you build the rest of the deck with all of the supporting evidence. So when someone says, tell me why you made that assumption, you go into a slide that actually covers all of the reasons for you making that assumption. That's going to build your credibility, but the fact that you've thought ahead, you've created that, is going to be really strong. Secondly, 3 slides doesn't work for complex analysis. The analysis is not the report that you're making. What you're making is a recommendation for the action that needs to be taken. So complex analysis might take months and months and require pages and pages of research to analyze. But when you're presenting this, you still need to come up with your bottom line up front. If you're making your recommendation 25 slides deep because the analysis was so complicated, the people that are listening to you are not really contextualizing what you're saying. Starting with the recommendation up front is going to be really important. Really, if you can't fit it in those 3 slides, you haven't finished your thinking, you've just finished the analyzing. So take this step to think about how you're going to communicate your analysis to get the action item done that you're staking your reputation against. All right, so recap. Don't show your work, show your thinking. Lead with a recommendation. Don't lead with the detailed analysis. Compress to 3 slides. If you can't get down to 3 slides, then you need to rethink how you're presenting the data. 3, check Claude's output or whatever AI tool you're using. Don't just copy and paste. Make sure that you understand what it's saying. Make sure that you're tweaking it to actually align with the stakeholders' requirements and that you can stand behind all of the numbers with the detailed analysis behind that. Finally, when you think about the recommendation, don't just stop when you get the decision. Think through, what do I do after 30, 60, 90 days? So the gap between making a decision and actually creating the outcome is where you may actually build influence or the actual recommendation may fall apart. So a few recommendations, 30 days in, 3 sentences, remind what the decision was, flag 1 data point. 60 days in, paragraph, what's the update, what did we achieve? Day 90, again, very short update, what did we project, what actually happened, what does that mean for the next cycle? What you're doing here is you're actually following up on the recommendations, you're building your credibility, and you're making sure that everyone understands that you have a hold of the information that you're recommending and you can be trusted moving forward. Finally, if you like this kind of approach, this was a very quick preview for a new course that I'm launching on applied AI for HR. So this is how do you think about data analytics, workflow optimization and utilization of different AI tools, and then communicating that by actually using AI in your day-to-day workflow. As part of our new course on the Meander Talent Academy, there's going to be 3 main modules and then a final exam. It's about 4.5 hours, probably a little bit longer, of instructional time, which means you can get SHRM professional development credits to your recertification. And the goal of the course is not to just teach you a bunch of things that you'll never use, but actually have exercises that will allow you to use your real data as soon as you finish each of the modules. So you'll be able to apply what you're learning, put it straight in action. If you're interested, there is a link in the description below. Check out all the resources on the Talent Academy. Hopefully you'll find something that's useful. And if you like this, please subscribe, please comment if you want to see anything different, and look forward to hearing how things go. Thank you.